I think we have a real opportunity to hear from some stunning public voices who are doing real work in the real world. I think one of the dangers about talking about compassion, or maybe one of the doubts that we often have, is this just fluffy rhetoric? Are we just talking about some kind of ideal world that we can't actually apply when we go back home to our families, our communities, our work tomorrow morning? So we have the chance to hear from some leaders who are taking real strides in their cities to make positive change in the world and to bring compassion to life. So I'd like to start right to my immediate left with the mayor who is hosting us in this beautiful city of San Francisco. Mayor Lee, I would love to hear a little bit of your reflections about why you came to public office in the first place. What were some of the motivations? We know that being a politician in a complex city is difficult, but we also know that San Francisco has a really grand and rich history of social cohesion, of coming together in times of crisis. What motivated you to come into this public office?
Thank you, Dr. Kim, and it's my pleasure to join these wonderful mayors that I get a chance to work with on a national basis and on a regional basis as well. I want to thank the Institute as well for hosting this event here in San Francisco, and to Stanford and Dignity Health for their signing up of the Compassion Charter to really take a look at all the things that we're doing in our leadership roles to express that compassion. I have to say, Mayor Fisher and I talked about this over a couple of years ago, where he really had a chance to sit down and talk to me at one of our conferences. And in the busyness of what mayors have to get done, whether it's pothole filling or traffic congestion, we found some moments where we expressed to each other what a compassionate city would be all about. And it takes me back to my roots. I came to San Francisco feeling that this was a city of diversity. As a son of immigrants, I felt, gosh, I gotta make it to San Francisco. I gotta find out what the city is all about. It sounded like it was the flower child of the 60s, that it was welcoming, that it was embracing of ideas that perhaps I couldn't find in my hometown, which was Seattle, by the way. Rained too much. But I did. I found the place. My background is a civil rights attorney, so I dedicated my whole life to helping people reach equity in their lives, be it women or minorities. And I actually sued the city and county of San Francisco 3 times before I worked for it. So I'm the passion in compassion. So I really felt that cities had to change the way they did their business on a day-to-day basis. Now, you advance forward, and gosh, I'm the mayor of this wonderful city. And I have carried this strong passion of helping people in all of my life. I've worked now for the city of San Francisco for 23 years and in various capacities. Director of the Human Rights Commission, then I really was sold on the idea that the new civil rights movement was about economics, not about just protesting your way or suing your way to equity, but really getting into understanding how a city is run from the business angle, and trying to find ways in which business and job creation would be part of that conversation about equity and about rights and about people having a foundation. Then I became your pothole director, Public Works, under Willie Brown, and then Gavin Newsom asked me to take up city administrator. That's where we created a 10-year plan to end chronic homelessness. It was really less about moving people off the streets and more about what is really genuine care for people. And we have a lot of reasons why people come to San Francisco. I always remind myself why I came with all excitement, and I have to repeat that thousands of times in my mind about how others were hoping their lives would be improved by coming to San Francisco, and they didn't meet some of the same fortunate circumstances that I did, maybe didn't get into the same circles of friends that helped me, or others that helped me see the way to both personal success and family success. They came in hard times, a lot of veterans trying to return home, a lot of people who lost their jobs in a very expensive city, sometimes a city that is saying that the affordability challenge is the greatest challenge today in the city of San Francisco. And I'm very sensitive to that because as the son of immigrants, I know how hard work, but I also know that one of the things you do is, as a child of a large family, is as soon as you succeed, or as soon as you have something of extra that you don't need, you turn around and you try to help somebody else.
Wow, that's
and
brilliant.
that's what I've learned as a person. Now I am implementing that in everything I say and do. This is a successful city. It is a rich city. And all I ask of the youth, where we provide them with free Muni for our underprivileged youth, they can go and ride Muni all day long to get to their jobs or their schools for free, because we made it happen that way. And all I asked of them is return the favor by keeping the door open. When you see someone who is elderly on the bus, give up your seat. Think about somebody else as an exchange for what we did to help you in your lives. I'm trying to create that culture. In the face of things, we have 2,000 technology companies, and we're known, these huge IPOs, you see them, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Salesforce, the other side company, they're making lots and lots of money. And there's where the image is. We're making so much money, but where are women and minorities in that workforce? How are these companies helping with the compassion agenda? And what I've often told people is, we have 2,000 technology companies that are growing and staying here in the city. I want to see, and I would like to see 2,000 foundations reflective of their values of recruiting that talent, is to return that in. And it's led by none other than Mark Benioff at Salesforce, who is I think the gold standard of philanthropy. The Salesforce Foundation is helping in so many ways with hundreds of millions of dollars, not just for residents of San Francisco, for Oakland as well, that is additionally challenged.
I'd like to ask Mayor Tate to think a little bit about the vision of a compassionate city where you have been. How has that been actually manifested? What was your vision? How are you making it real in your own city, thinking about what you've heard from Mayor Lee?
I echo what Mayor Lee said. It is a privilege to be here. So Anaheim is a city in Southern California, largest city in Orange County. It's about 350,000. One of the most, people might not think of Anaheim this way, but it's one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the United States. USA Today, a few years ago, called it the new Brooklyn. So it's this city of rich ethnicity. But a lot of people don't know one another. And so I've been on the city council going back from 1994 to 2004. And towards the end of that term, I met up with a fellow, and he's a holistic doctor. And he had put these signs around town that said, "Make kindness contagious." So I met with him, and he was telling me, actually it's about his daughter, Natasha. Her little 6-year-old daughter had died in a car accident, and she had talked about kindness. And she had written all these little things for a little girl about kindness. And he says, he says, in holistic medicine, which I practice, he says, in regular medicine, you could treat the symptoms, or you could stimulate the body to heal itself holistically. He says, I think the same applies to a city. You can either treat the symptoms, or you could stimulate the city to heal itself. He said, I think that has something to do with kindness. And maybe because at the point I was 10 years on the council of feeling like I was treating the symptoms, I was at that point, and it just hit me that this kindness thing is really, really, there's something to it, about holistically changing the city, about changing culture. I'm in business also. I've got an engineering environmental business. So I know in business, if you really want to change a business, it's all about culture. That trumps strategy and procedures. So the way you do that is you set a core value. And so I was termed out. I thought I was done with politics, but 6 years later, this mayor's seat was becoming open, and this idea of kindness just pulled at me. I can't really explain it, but I really needed to implement it. So I ran on a platform of kindness. Never heard that in a public discourse or a municipal discourse. And I remember my first campaign event, and they asked why I'm running. And okay, here goes. I didn't want to sound, Pollyannish or whatever. And I said, I'm running because I want to instill a core value of kindness. And I just looked around, and everyone, almost everyone, went like this. And people get it. They know there's something deeper that needs to be done. It's not just looking to the government, hey, we need, this program or this money here. It's about changing the culture. So at the end of the day, where I want to be, in Anaheim, where we want to be, is I think that we're known as a city of kindness. And we're doing it. And there's great things happening. We have the school district, 20 elementary schools, K through 6, 20,000 kids are doing 1 million acts of kindness. They're just about ready to hit it. And it's the most cool thing you can imagine. It's changing the schools. One principal said, toughest school in town. These kids 90% of these kids are on the free lunch program, fall below the federal poverty level. And they're changing their schools one act of kindness at a time. And as one principal said, we've got our calls to the principal for discipline problems have been cut in half since we started doing this. So rather than saying don't bully, be kind. And it's changing the culture. So there's a whole bunch of stories like that, and I don't want to take up all the time because I know we've got a lot to talk about today, but it's just been wonderful, and it's about culture change, and Anaheim is a city of kindness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Tate. I love the idea of treating the city as a body holistically and really healing it with kindness. It's really a startling image. I'd like to now turn to Mayor Strickland and hear a little bit more about what you're doing in Tacoma. I have to confess I don't know so much about Washington, and I'd love to hear more. What is happening that we should know about in compassion in your city?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I would like to thank my colleague Mayor Fisher, who invited me a month ago when I was in Louisville visiting his city. So thank you for the invitation, Mayor Fisher. So I think that as leaders, everything that we do is based on our core values. And those core values are shaped by our experiences as individuals. So like Mayor Lee, I too am an immigrant, but my story may be a little bit different. So I was born in Korea, and my mother's Korean and my father's African American. And he met her there when he was a soldier. And he joined the Army because he was a teenager who grew up in rural Georgia who wanted to send money home to his family. So fast forward to them coming to America. So they are in Virginia in the middle of the night. My father's in uniform, and they're with their 18-month-old daughter. And they are driving around for hours because no one will rent a motel room to them. So they're driving around. And then finally, they come to a motel, and there's a woman who works there, and she says, yes, I'll let you stay here. So fast forward to me becoming mayor now. And I said to myself, when I become mayor of Tacoma, I want to make sure that no one I represent was ever made to feel the way my parents felt. So talk about that in the form of compassion. So I've not necessarily called out compassion as something that's a core value of my city, but we talk about treating all people with respect and dignity. And that really, in my opinion, has the basis of compassion bred into it. Now, Tacoma is about 30 miles south of Seattle, so we're a part of the metropolitan Seattle region. So I tell people we are what is Oakland is to San Francisco, what St. Paul is to Minneapolis, what Baltimore is to DC. So with status as what I call a second city to a larger city, there are challenges that we have. But I think there's also an opportunity for us to do things because we are smaller and we are more nimble. And one of the things that I've done recently is that I've started an office of equity and empowerment. And again, coming back to the idea that we want to make sure that all people are treated with respect and dignity. And typically when we talk about compassion, I think it's very easy for us to fall back to social services and people who are in need. So we will talk about solving homelessness. We will talk about our most vulnerable residents. We'll talk about the things that naturally come with compassion. But I also think it is important for us to think about using compassion in how we deal with people in conflict. And let me give you 2 examples. The City Council a few years ago passed a resolution in favor of marriage equality because that was on the ballot in Washington State. Well, one of my colleagues does not support marriage equality. So he had to, sitting in front of an audience, talk about why he couldn't support this vote. And it was hard for him, it was painful for him, but that was what his faith was about. And I have never seen him treat anyone disrespectfully, but he said he could not get there. So instead of berating him, I actually said to him, I totally disagree with you because you're I totally disagree with you on this issue, but you are my colleague, you are my friend, and I'm going to say to you, I'm not going to judge you based on you taking that position. My ability to do that with him made him feel better about himself, but not feel like he was such an outsider. And again, he and I were in totally opposite sides of this conversation, but I thought it was necessary because he was out there by himself to show him some compassion for where he stood, even though we disagreed completely. Now, there was an event last year that we have in Pierce County called the Tacoma Prayer Breakfast. And every year there are about 1,000 people who gather in a dome stadium, and they have a speaker. Well, last year's speaker was a Supreme Court justice from the state of Alabama. And I can't even remember his name, Justice Moore, I think. And he had gone on a tear, sending letters to every governor in America, wanting to amend the Constitution to say that marriage equality was wrong and bad. Now, I've attended this breakfast every single year, and I've given opening remarks. I chose not to go to this breakfast. And the reason I chose not to go was that I didn't want to show support for someone who couldn't support many of my friends, loved ones, and people who were fighting for the right to be married. And so it seems almost I did two things that were almost in opposite forms regarding the same topic. But I thought it was important for me as mayor of Tacoma to show my people that I can't support someone who's going to work hard against people's right to marry, to vilify them, to be disrespectful to them, and to call them names. So I think those are two examples. Those are two examples of how, through your role as a leader, you can affect change. But again, I took two kind of different positions on the same topic, but it's really about, again, how you interact with people in positions of leadership and how you use that compassion to get to where you need to go. So I'll stop there right now, and I'm going to hand this over to Mayor Fisher.
Mayor Fisher, I was intrigued by your definition of compassion as really treating people with respect in order to bring out their full human potential and flourishing. I hear that a lot in Mayor Strickland's approach. There was a lot of respect, but also confrontation. I think I'd love to hear a little bit more about what are some of the challenges of leadership in bringing compassion into the cities. I imagine you must have faced some resistance at times. There's some belief that human nature is naturally competitive. You talked about whether compassion is being weak. Could you share with us maybe one of the challenges that you faced? And also, what are some of the opportunities as being a mayor of a city that maybe you wouldn't have if you were working at the level of a state governor or working at the level of the whole country?
Mayors would like to think that cities are the sources of innovation these days. Federal government, as I mentioned before, certainly is not functioning in any way that we're proud of. Most of our state capitals also have similar levels of dysfunction. So what that gives us at the mayor level is an opportunity for our cities to be the petri dish for innovation, experimentation. We are accountable for daily results. Unlike the legislative branch, their accountability is questionable. It happens when the voters show up every 2 or 4 years, but they don't have to run things like we have to. So the challenge then is, how do you take a city, and we all have fairly decent sized cities here, where you could just react all day long. You could just react to everything comes through the mayor's office. You don't hear about it, but everything comes through there. So you could react to your latest tragedies, police issues, explosions. You could go cut ribbons all day long if that's all what you want to do. But you could avoid really trying to move the city forward, but you'd be busy. So to have a compassionate city, to have an innovative city, to have a city of empowerment, you have to be intentional. And you have to dedicate resources and time to say, we're going to create a new space in our community, not because I'm invented compassion, but I want to influence who we are and affect the culture of our city in a super positive way. So then how are you intentional? What's your strategy? I know this might sound wonky, but it's not going to happen just through a speech. It has to say, okay, here's our specific plan. Here's some of our stakeholders, Tom Williams, Owsley Brown, Jim Doty visiting town. Bring the Dalai Lama, make him part of the team. These things, all people are saying, this is happening here. How can I get involved? Okay, so I would say the main thing is intentionality, and then what happens is, like many of us in life that have set noble goals. It could be a personal goal, business goal. A noble goal being a more compassionate city, a kinder city, a city where human potential flourishes. That's a goal. Here's how we measure it. Let's go. And you might go off track, but moving toward a positive goal like that always ends up in good things. So yesterday I stopped in Dallas on the way here and spoke to 12 mayors in the Metroplex about compassionate cities. I'm on my compassion tour this week. And they wanted to, what's the playbook? What's the, I said, no, this is more about love and heart and soul and, guiding and encouraging. So a lot of it is for then leaders, whether they be public leaders like ourselves or business leaders, just to be comfortable exposing who you are. All of us up here on the stage, we're blessed to be raised in families of love, where parents talked about service, and if there's something good to do, do it. Everybody's the same. Nobody's better than anybody else. The more we can share that in our leadership positions, the more people are liberated. People are yearning to express love and be loved in a broader context. And those of us that hold public office, or any of you all are all leaders too here, use that. Have that conversation, and you'd be amazed at how well people respond to it.
Just hearing the four of you talk, I really wish we had more examples of leadership like that springing up around the city and around the world and around this country. And it was amazing to hear Karen Armstrong open this session this morning talking about twinning cities or bringing together like-minded leaders in order to have more of a collective impact. It would be something that I think would really be worth exploring, and it sounds like you're already beginning to do when you get together with your groups of mayors. I'd like to open it up now a little bit to any of you who would like to respond or share a little bit more about your views on compassion. But just to kick off, I would like to say that yesterday we had a youth gathering, and I was really touched by the questions that were coming from young people who are living the reality of trying to be compassionate in a difficult environment and also really worrying about their futures. They were talking about climate change. They were talking about being compassionate to animals. They were talking about bullying on the school ground. They're talking about how to get top marks in the class and still be a good person. What would you say to young people, and what are you doing with young people to create more compassionate communities in your cities?
We, again, under this umbrella of kindness, we started something called the Mayor's Mentorship Program. And we have a whole bunch of kids in high school who are sons and daughters of immigrants working typically in the tourism industry, 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs, who don't really know that path to college or to a career. So I know that the power of a mentor is tremendous. Just that act of kindness, connecting one person to another. So we have one thing in Anaheim, we have all these businesses and all these people that I think want to be kind. Hundreds of thousands of people coming into work every day. If we could just connect one-on-one to a sophomore in high school and say, here's a connection. Actually, Dr. Doty here, I heard Dr. Doty speak at UCI and talked about the power of a mentor in your life. And I think a woman who worked at the magic shop, you told me about that, and what that created and all the goodness that came from that. We talked, so anyway, we started this mentorship program, and it's just taken off. But people, I tell you, people want to be kind. And maybe as mayors, the simple thing is, when you talk about it all the time, but let people know they're free to be kind. And that's kind of expected. When you're in a city of Anaheim, it's not where we live, but it's who we are. And we're a kind city, and it's expected to do something for someone else. Kindness is not just being nice, it's an action word. You can't sit on your couch and be kind. You have to go out, you have to do something for someone else with no expectation of return. So that's the culture that we're building. And it took I got elected 4 years ago. It took a couple of years of talking. Every time I speak, I talk about kindness. People don't get it at first, but they start to catch on like any culture change. And we said, it really, the first couple of years, the ship was in port. Now, I feel the sails are full and things are happening. The way we deal with our homeless issue, same thing, kindness. I don't even know if I'm answering that question. I get going on this topic. But anyway, particularly the mentorship program with the high school kids. I'm very excited about what that's doing in Anaheim.
Thank you. So I will say that for me, I'm not going to talk about one of the multitude of programs that we have happening with our school district, but I will say this. I spend a lot of time speaking in front of students. I'm invited to speak to children in elementary school. I'm invited to high school graduations, to scholarship events, and so I use my pulpit to communicate some messages. And I will say that when it comes to kindness, I think there are a couple of things. I'm going to talk about one through the lens of gender for a second, because when we talk about being elected officials, as a woman, when I ran for office, people said, oh, I know you're smart, I know you're capable, I know you're great, but are you tough enough? And I don't think there's a man who ever ran for office who was asked if he was tough enough. Now, conversely, when we think about how we socialize our young men, we have a very interesting definition of masculinity. And there are certain qualities that we associate with what masculinity means. And I don't know that compassion and kindness come to the top of the list. So when I speak in front of young groups of people, especially when I interact with young men, I say, you know what? It's okay to tell someone you love them. It's okay to say that you're afraid and hurt. You have to give our young men permission to be open, because as a society, we really don't do that. Now, the other thing I do too is when I talk to especially high school students, please put that digital device down. And I need to take my own advice, by the way. But one of the things that I think is so interesting is in how we communicate. When you send someone a text message or an email, they are not getting the privilege of the tone of your voice, the expression on your face, and looking into your eyes. So we have become a society that communicates in a way that, in my opinion, is sometimes void of emotion and compassion. So I try and encourage young people as often as possible to interact face to face, try to solve your problems in person. And I say to them, if you're gonna text it or email it, then it better be something you're willing to say to someone's face. And so for me, it's advice about trying to get away from the devices and interacting more with each other, and really helping us think as a society about how we define masculinity. And it's okay to be warm and loving and compassionate if you're a male, and it doesn't mean you're soft. And you know what? Even if it does mean you're soft, there's nothing wrong with being soft if you're a man. That's a good thing.
For our youth, we actually have a youth commission in San Francisco, and it's all filled with youth from all the different diverse communities, and they get together on a monthly basis to form an agenda to tell government what they should pay attention to. And so we do that very seriously. But years ago, when I became the interim mayor of San Francisco, I knew that we were trying to get ourselves out of recession. And one fact always stuck in my mind, it was 3 times harder for a youth to get a job in the city of San Francisco than it was for anybody else, than adults. I remember that to the point where we began as a summer youth jobs program under the kind of general umbrella of the president's call out to really try to create more jobs for our youth. And then it became our own after youth became involved and said, this feels good to get a job, and repeat that over and over. So this past year, we created 7,500 jobs, and we're going year round. And youth often say, God, to have the dignity of earning your money, and then to have a free muni system to help us get there, I think those are great demonstrations of compassion for our youth. But also at the very top, I had to get a lot of help. San Francisco government couldn't do it alone. We had to actually have a conversation with all of our large employers in the city. And when we met with the companies, whether it's Wells Fargo, B of A, the tech companies, Starbucks, I got them back to a setting like this, and I said, just as CEOs and presidents of your company, just want you to spend 1 minute. Who helped you get your first job? Because usually it wasn't yourself or your own resume. Somebody helped you get that first job, because that's what happened to me. That very moment, that 1 minute, I said, you think about that, because I'm going to ask you to turn around and help these kids get their first jobs, and they will remember, just as you remember who helped you. And this compassion theme, it really is about caring. It's about personalizing these stories about how you help people. and how others who come through this culture in San Francisco can say, somebody help me. It should be part of my DNA to help somebody else initiate their first feeling for what a city does with you and for you. That's what we're trying to create with our youth.
Thank you so much, Mayor. I think we're about to wrap up now. I'd love to give Mayor Fisher the last word, and maybe then we can thank all of our speakers. I know Mayor Lee is needing to leave very soon.
Well, first, I want to thank our mayors here. First, Ed, thanks for having us in your city. Shortest commute, easiest for you to be here. Appreciate that. Toughest schedule to handle, though. And then,
We're just lucky you didn't talk about the Giants winning the World Series.
I was waiting for the Giants thing. Ed Lee's a total trash talker when it comes to San Francisco sports.
I have compassion for you.
Yeah, but thanks, Mayor Tate and Mayor Strickland as well. One of the great things, we have a great group, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, where we can benchmark with each other and see what's working and not working. So don't give up hope on government. I don't think any of us are total lifetime government folks. We're just people that are trying to help. And the compassion theme, the kindness theme comes through that. And I think all of our goal is just to see this is not some kind of special event that we're having on empathy and compassion. It's just who we are. And so much of this is unlearning what society has taught us we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be cooperative, loving partners that help each other and lift each other up. But in fact, that's generally how our country has evolved, to where we've looked at what our challenges are, and we've had a lot of them in our country, but we've faced them on, we've dealt with them, and we're moving forward. And we certainly have challenges these days as well. So I feel just like this pathway back through secular ethics, reconnecting with who we all are. It's not one religion. It's not one race. It's the human religion. It's the human race. And the more we can connect on that level and be proud to talk about it, the quicker we'll get to a better place for all of us. So on behalf of the mayors and all of the mayors of America, thank you, everybody, for being here today.